I've always enjoyed late night walks. There's something about the stillness that makes life feel simpler. I'm a welder by trade, been doing it for over 40 years. I live alone on a big farm, just me and my dog, Bosley. The house is too big for one person, but I couldn't bring myself to downsize after my wife, Maria, passed away. The kids moved out years ago, and ever since cancer took her, it's just been me and Bosley. One night, after a long day in the shop, I decided to take a walk. My property is large, so one loop usually satisfies me. The air was cool and Bosley trotted happily beside me. Sometimes I think he likes me more than I like myself. I've walked that loop hundreds of times, but as I headed back to the house, something caught my eye. I glanced up at the second-story window, the one that looks out from the bedroom Maria and I used to share. For a split second I thought I saw something move. I stopped dead in my tracks, staring up at that window. There was no reason anyone should be in there. I hadn't stepped foot in that room in years, couldn't bring myself to. My blood boiled at the thought of some stranger breaking into my home. I rushed inside, my heart pounding, and raced upstairs. The room was empty, just as I'd left it. No sign of anything out of place. I searched everywhere, but found nothing. I felt foolish, but couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something had been there. The next night, I woke to Bosley growling. He's a good dog and only barks when there's a reason. I sat up in bed, straining to hear. That's when I caught it, creaking, coming from above me. My stomach dropped. The sound was coming from the bedroom directly above mine. I debated grabbing my hunting rifle, but decided against it. If I had to, I was confident I could handle whatever or whoever was up there. I grabbed my flashlight and crept upstairs. Once again, the room was empty, untouched, just as before. The next morning, I found the kitchen lights on. I was certain I had turned them off before going to bed. That was when the panic set in. Someone had to be in my house. I called the police, explaining what was happening. They came and searched every inch of the property, but found nothing. They were polite, but clearly thought I was imagining things. The following night, I decided to check the bedroom again. Maybe I thought it would ease my mind. But when I opened the door, I froze. Maria's clothes I had packed away after she died, were scattered across the floor. And then I saw her. A woman stood in the doorway staring at me. Her face was obscured, but she was too short to be Maria. I didn't know who she was, but she didn't belong there. Without thinking, I charged at her. She turned and bolted down the stairs out the front door. By the time I made it outside, she was gone. Bosley and I searched the property, but there was no trace of her. That night I didn't sleep. For months I barely slept. Every creak of the house sent chills down my spine. One night I was sitting in the living room when I noticed her again. She was standing in the yard watching me through the window. My heart stopped. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside, Bosley close behind. She didn't move, just stood there in the moonlight, a dark silhouette against the night. I fired warning shots into the air, and she finally turned and disappeared into the woods. She hasn't come back since, but I know it's only a matter of time. I've prepared myself to defend my home, but this constant fear is exhausting. Thank God for Bosley. I have no idea how I'd get through this without him. I'll send an update if anything happens. Forgive me if I don't remember every detail of the story. It happened a while ago. I grew up in Ardmore, Pennsylvania. Not much goes on around here, so finding things to do can be a challenge. In high school, a few friends and I would sneak into and explore old abandoned buildings. That was the kind of thing we did at that age. I didn't realize how popular this sort of activity was until years later. Apparently, a lot of people like exploring abandoned places. There was an abandoned church we'd been to a couple of times before. It was in Narberth, and I actually remember the exact address, 198 Elmwood Avenue. The place was creepy, but it became our go-to spot for late-night thrills. One fall evening, a few of us decided to hit the church and drink a little inside. The air was chilly with that crisp bite of autumn. There were 6 of us: me, Luna, Gina, Johnny, Max and Ali. The church sat behind an 8-foot chain-link fence that we had to climb to get in. The doors were all boarded up, so we always entered through a window on the side. Once inside, the first thing you noticed was the floor, or the lack of one. The entire first floor was just dirt, as if the floorboards had been ripped out years ago. There was only a gaping hole in the centre, where a set of concrete stairs led down to the basement. That's where we always ended up. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one had a door. The others were just door frames. The first room we entered was the largest. There wasn't much inside: some old furniture, broken chairs and a busted couch. I remember having to shush Johnny at least a dozen times. He was a lightweight, and the small amount of alcohol he'd had was making him loud and restless. Still, being in such a big group always made me feel safer. We were messing around, laughing and drinking as usual. I think we even had a small speaker playing music, though I don't clearly remember. Out of nowhere, a door slammed shut. The sound was so loud I jumped. We all froze, staring at each other with worried expressions. At first I thought someone had accidentally closed the door, but no one was near it. Almost immediately, Luna, Gina and Johnny bolted for the stairs, sprinting out of the basement. That left me, Max and Ali behind. We were the fearless ones, and none of us were ready to leave just yet. My heart was pounding, but I didn't want to let the wind, or whatever it was, freak me out. Max and Ali seemed to feel the same way. After standing in silence for a few moments, we decided to investigate. Slowly we crept toward the door that had slammed shut. Behind it was a small room, and the first thing I noticed was a dresser. The mirror on top of it was cracked, and there were red stains smeared across the surface. At first I thought it was old paint, but as I got closer I realized something terrifying. It wasn't completely dry. The stains still had that sticky sheen, like whatever it was hadn't been there long. The hairs on my neck stood up. I started having second thoughts about staying. Someone or something had been in that room recently. Then I noticed an old photo sitting on top of the dresser. It was a black and white picture of a woman in a wedding dress. She was smiling, but something about the image unsettled me. The whole scene felt wrong. I backed away from the dresser, but just as I turned, we heard another noise. This time it wasn't a door. The sound came from one of the other rooms, the one we had just been in. That was all Max and Ali needed to decide they'd had enough. I wasn't going to argue with them. We grabbed our stuff and ran out of the church as fast as we could. When we climbed back over the fence and hit the pavement, none of us said a word. As I turned to look back at the church, I thought I saw the silhouette of a person standing in the open window. To this day, I pray that my mind was just playing tricks on me, but I'll never know for sure. My friends and I never went back to that church together. For the rest of the time we stayed friends, we avoided the place. I did return once, years later, but by then the church was gone. It had been completely demolished. I still have no idea what we experienced that night, but I'm grateful my friends were there. If I'd been alone, I might have convinced myself the whole thing never happened. If anyone wants to dig into the history of that place, go ahead. I was never able to find much online, but I wouldn't be surprised if that church had a dark past I don't know about.